So again, thank you very much for joining. Welcome to this customer success session, the final event of this year's EdTech Startup Festival run by Brighteye Ventures. I'm Rhys, Brighteye's head of research. We're the most active EdTech investor in Europe, specializing in the early stages, writing checks of $250,000 up to around 5 million. You may have heard a bit about our thesis earlier in the week. But if not, you're able to catch up with that session and lots of the others online as well via our YouTube channel and also via the website. So you can certainly stay in touch with everything we've been doing. We know that customer success is a really top topic for many founders and their teams. So we're excited to be bringing you the first ever session that we've done focused on customer success. And we at Brighteye certainly look forward to learning more about this critical area in the hour ahead. And we, of course, have a brilliant lineup with us today to help us understand and structure our thinking around customer success. The structure of the session will be some brief opening remarks from us on what we've seen in portfolio companies and the wider startup community, particularly relating to how founders approach founder-led customer success. And then we'll be hearing from our speakers, which of course I'm sure is the main reason that you're here. You'll hear them talk about things like net revenue retention, first steps to managing customers and clients, as well as critical perspectives on setting up customer success as a revenue accelerant from the start. A quick point of notice that this is of course a session for you. So throughout the session, we invite you to come forward and share your cases and questions. You can do that on the chat. We might be able to bring you off mute as well if you'd like to share your question out loud. And depending on how those questions are filtering through, we may look to split into breakout rooms, which would be led by today's speakers. So you can look forward to that and hopefully getting a slightly smaller group discussion as well. And then we'll have a quick wrap up where we walk through the panel session. You can share your feedback and hopefully you'll hear that you've got lots of chances to say hello to the speakers, to ask your questions and to listen to some experiences from others. So without further ado, let's meet some of the speakers that we're going to be hearing from. So first up, we have Andrea, founder of Success Accelerators, a mentor with Brighteye, a mentor with SwissNext, a mentor with First Round, and of course lots of brilliant customer success experience as well. So Andrea, we'd love to hear a bit about you, your story in your own words, and of course how you came to become a CS leader.
Fantastic. Yeah, well, thank you for having me, and wonderful to see so many folks on here. It's a real pleasure to be rounding up what I've heard have been a really engaging few days of sessions. It's always exciting to join groups like this. My background has been kind of building and scaling growth stage companies from pre-seed, like first initial idea and business plan, all the way up to Series C. And I come with kind of a T-shaped skill set. So I've run everything non-engineering. I've been the first non-engineering hire and kind of worn all the hats, hired the folks to take some of those hats off, and then eventually taken all those back on as kind of SVP of operations, COO type roles, GM type roles. But where I've gone most deep is in customer success. So I've also built customer success teams from the ground up. I've been the first VP of customer success. I've been the second VP of customer success. My sweet spot, again, I've done everything from pre-seed through Series C multiple times, and my sweet spot is really the Series A to B, right? Where you're just starting to get things off the ground, starting to scale things, starting to find repeatability, finding repeatability, and now trying to get more of it. I love those stages. I love the building. I love the hands-on. And I've done this across multiple companies, 16 plus years, successful exits. And for the past about year, I've been really enjoying kind of bringing what I've learned and going broader. And so as Rhys mentioned, I am kind of coaching, mentoring, advising companies across kind of multiple VCs and multiple of their portcos and multiple kind of accelerators. Some of that is I recently moved from Silicon Valley, where I've been doing all this work, to Zurich. And so enjoying seeing what's all that's happening out here in Europe. And some of it has been just genuinely enjoying bringing what I've learned and supporting other companies and more companies. So I'm excited to share with you all today and excited to be with such an amazing group.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And next up, we have Ejieme, who started out her career at Accenture, has been MD of Customer Experience at the New York Times, VP of Customer Success at Snaps, and then is currently at Quiq, I understand, as GM EMEA. So I'm aware I've missed out several steps in an illustrious journey so far. So we'd love to hear your story.
Rhys, thanks for having me, and lovely to meet everyone. Excited to share a bit more and really excited that you all are thinking about customer success so early in your founder journeys. That's music to my ears. As Rhys said, I have been a career customer-led growth expert. So started my career in management consulting at Accenture and PwC, helping some of the world's largest companies think about how to use their customers as a strategic source. You would assume that that was a given, but not always. So I spent quite a bit of time in the post-acquisition side. So looking at customer experience, customer service, customer strategy. Did that for several years before deciding to work for the customer. And so I had a pretty amazing role at the New York Times, helping them along their digital transformation as they had to start to look at individual subscribers as opposed to advertising revenue to grow the business. So help them stand up a customer experience practice, everything from metrics to organizationally, how they would run, and then also getting to work with the newsroom to think about how they could have a subscriber first mentality while also maintaining journalistic integrity and impartiality. So that was a lot of fun. And I think I maybe caught the subscription bug, because I then went to a SaaS platform called Snaps. This was very early in the conversational AI kind of ecosystem and time frame. So was the first customer success leader for them. They were a Series A, about 20-person startup. And they wanted to pivot from being an agency model to being a SaaS model. And so I helped them stand up their customer success practice and team. And that's really where I caught the bug also of really thinking about customer success as a revenue driver and not just what we think of a post-sale work to be done. So over time started to really show that, having customer success kind of take on almost 80% of our revenue at that time was going to be what drove sustainable growth for our business. So I've essentially been with the same company now for 6 years. We've been acquired by another organization called Quiq, ran customer success for them before 2 years ago, deciding to kind of now own all of our go-to-market for EMEA. Some of what Andrea said resonated because, being in customer success and seeing the kind of downstream impact of decisions that, let's say, the marketing and the sales team have made, now I'm getting to actually inform who are the types of customers and prospective customers we talk to, and how do we take a customer-led approach even as we're talking to them earlier in the funnel. So it's been quite the journey and quite exciting. And I'm happy to share a bit of what I've learned in the process and hear how you all are thinking about leveraging your customers to drive your sustainable revenue outcomes as well.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And it's all it's kind of meta, right? Because you're basically a CS leader working at a company that provides AI and customer experience.
It is quite meta, yes.
So lots of perspectives on show here. So I'm sure you can already tell we have the perfect speakers here today to help you think about customer success. We might say CS through the session. So just flagging that of course means customer success. It's not an acronym for something else more technical than that. But just to get us started, I'll try and share a little more on customer success as we see it, including why founder-led CS works in the early days, but less so as the company starts to achieve traction. And that's largely just to add a bit of context to what we'll hear afterwards. So firstly, just sort of defining customer success as we understand it. And again, I'm sure we'll be corrected on lots of these things as we go. But customer success is not just about support or retention, as has been highlighted already. It's about ensuring your customers achieve their desired outcomes with your product or service, acting as a revenue driver for the business. So in a B2B context, successful customers become advocates. They lead to expansions in revenues, in renewals, and in wider referrals as well. Unlike B2C, where customer touch points might be lower, B2B relationships are deeper and often require more attention, especially in those early stages. And in most startups, regardless of the sector, founders tend to be their company's first customer success leads. So here to kind of add a bit of reassurance to that, because I'm sure that's the case for several people listening today. That tends to work and be appropriate for several reasons. At least at the start, founders tend to, or at least probably should be, the person that has the deepest understanding of the product, of the vision, the value proposition. And that knowledge is obviously really important in educating customers on how to achieve success with the product. They're, of course, working pretty closely with initial customers, gaining direct insights into their needs and challenges, and also sort of helping them define success. It works sort of both ways. And then also in the early days, customers buy into the vision of your companies as much as they do to the products. And so founders, of course, are very important to establishing that trust and credibility with the first group of customers who, of course, don't have swathes of reviews to lean on when it comes to picking out and starting those relationships. So it does tend to work quite well, at least in the early days. The founders are, of course, very able to translate customer feedback directly into product development. They're the people often closest to the roadmap, as well as, of course, to what customers are actually using before the roadmap's extended. Of course, there's the limited resources factor. You of course can't afford to be building out your team until you've got some of those relationships up and running and they're working quite well for you. And then the other sort of point that we'd highlight in terms of how it can work very well is that founders are very well placed to sort of set the tone when it comes to sort of establishing some of those customer relationships in the early days. And of course, developing a culture both internally and externally, and particularly if you're looking to have longer term relationships with those customers beyond the time when you're capable of having a founder-led CS function. But of course, naturally, as has been alluded to, and as is very clear, that situation can't last forever. Ultimately, all founders really want to get to a point where they can build a really excellent, high-functioning CS function and hire incredible people to take that forward and develop it into something that is a sort of real accelerant, as we've said several times, and as we'll say again, for the organization. And some of the triggers that might sort of cause this kind of expansion or creation of a CS team could be that your customer base grows. It could be that your focus shifts from acquiring new customers to looking to expanding existing accounts, and of course upselling things that you've developed on your roadmap that have been informed by previous customer success experiences. It could be that your product has matured and become more specialized, which means that customer success is more nuanced and more detailed than it might have been before when you first were sort of setting up the relationship. And so I guess that sort of hopefully brings a bit of context to sort of how we see it sometimes in the early days, particularly in sort of pre-seed and seed stage deals, companies. And so by ending on those kind of inflection points, we hopefully have set Andrea and Ejieme up for talking about some of the points that they have planned. So Andrea, the floor is yours, hopefully not to correct all of that, but hopefully to help provide some helpful context.
Yeah, not at all. Nothing to correct. I think it makes a lot of sense. Let me make sure this is working. Hold on. There we go. All right. Can you all see my screen landing and expanding?
Yes.
Slide. Fantastic. So presumably you are all here because you understand the importance of customer success and investing in your existing customers. Maybe not. Maybe you're here for the ride and to see, like, is this something I should be thinking about? So I am here. If you're going to take a few things out of my talk, the first is that customers are gold. Your existing customers are gold, and investing in them early can have a huge impact on your business. And then a couple key pieces of where to start, assuming you believe this to be true, which hopefully you will after this slide. Where do you start the efforts? So I hear all the time, and I know this too, right, from being in the early days of companies, right? You're out there focusing on sales, getting the first 100,000, getting the first maybe million, and okay, we can focus on the customers later. But look at this graph. So what this chart shows is your year-end ARR, annual recurring revenue, money, income, basically, at the end of the year in a few different scenarios. The first scenario at the bottom, the darkest line, is with really healthy sales motions. Sales is doubling year over year. Every year you're closing twice the number of the amount of new ARR, annual recurring revenue, as the previous year, but you're not renewing anything. It's all new sales. Nice, like hockey stick growth, right? But then you look one line above, assuming that you're maintaining, so net revenue retention of the revenue you closed last year, you're keeping about 50% of that and then building on top. And you already have a healthier curve. You already have more. 50% is like, yeah, you're doing a little bit with existing customers. You're like maybe doing a little bit of investment, maybe like responding to some of their support requests. Probably not a lot of proactive engagement. The very top line is 120% net revenue retention, which is completely realistic often for early companies. I've gotten that regularly, or at least the line below 100% net retention, right? What this means is that maybe you have some customers churning out, but you have others that are growing. Of the revenue you had last year, you're either maintaining that same annual recurring revenue from existing clients the next year, or ideally you're growing it. Some customers are churning out who maybe weren't a good fit, but maybe others are doubling, maybe others are tripling, right? Land and expand motions, healthy customer retention and growth. That, if you have that in 5 years, in all of these cases, we started at 2 million ARR. It's the same if you start at 500,000 ARR, a million. You're basically triple where with healthy revenue retention and growth, you're almost triple where you need to be. Sorry, not where you need to be. You're triple where you would be if all you focused on was new sales. And this is a false premise even to begin with, because this assumes that you're able to get 2x year over year new sales without focusing on existing customers, which we know isn't true, right? New customers are driving your strategy. Rhys was talking earlier about the focus that they can help you have on where the product should go, where marketing should go. Heck, I've had existing customers write my sales pitch for me because they know how to talk to other folks like them. Word of mouth, they're bringing you referrals, they're bringing you new references. At some point in this 5-year cycle, you're going to need more funding. I've never had an investor not ask for customer references. The metrics that matter, if you're looking at CAC to LTV, right? How much does it cost to acquire a customer versus how much money are you getting out of them long term? You have to be focused on that long-term value. So all the things that matter as a business scales up, a lot of them are driven by existing customers. We could spend an hour on this. We could spend an hour on the metrics. We could spend an hour on why it matters. Hopefully, many of you are here kind of already bought into this idea that existing customers matter. Maybe you want to take this slide and circulate it around to convince the rest of your company. But let's say you're bought in, now what? Right. And when I started in customer success, like, I don't know, 16 years ago, it wasn't even a thing. 14 years ago, we started using the word customer success. Now there's so many best practices and playbooks and frameworks, and it can get overwhelming, right? And I've talked to a lot of early stage companies that are like, but where do we start? Like, oh my gosh, we've seen these like executive business review decks that look amazing and we're not there, and that's fine. The first steps matter. Everything that you put in just to start makes a huge difference. And so if you're starting, there's a few key areas to focus on. The first that I regularly see is this shift from reactive to proactive. Right? So if you haven't really been paying attention to existing accounts, probably you're stuck in kind of reactive mode, right? A lot of support tickets coming in, you're fixing stuff, you're firefighting, you're making sure the product's working. That's reactive. So the first mental shift is just to proactive. And the next slide focuses a little bit on a couple areas to focus on for that. But it kind of leads into this focus on value, where if you're proactive, you're focused on the customer's value, you're focused on their business outcomes, you're focused on key stages post-sale that can drive the kind of outcomes they want. And rather than kind of waiting for them to come to you with a problem, you're proactively engaging, you're proactively driving and proactively measuring value for what they need. And then I put here kind of multi-threading accounts, but you're focused on the stakeholders, on the relationships, on the people in your customer accounts that you need to be engaging with in order to drive this proactive value. And ideally, you're focused on more than just one person per account. Rhys talked about founder-led initially. You can do this when it's still founder-led CS, right? Even if it means and ideally, the founders and your executives might still be mapped, even once you have a CS team, to certain executive sponsors at customers. But it's kind of this key of who are the executive sponsors, who are the buyers, who are the users. You're aware of who the key people are in accounts, and you have them mapped back to your side. And all of this can be done in the early days, and it can be done at 80%, right? It doesn't have to be super polished and perfect. Just do it. Even if it's a Google spreadsheet where you have it mapped out, just do it. And in terms of starting, so what does this look like, right? I'm talking about proactive, I'm talking about value-centered, but like, where do you actually start? How do you do that? And I like to think about key phases in a customer's life cycle. Again, as your company gets bigger, as you get more involved, as you get more detailed, as you have more people, you might have this multi-stage customer journey map of all of these touch points and inflection points and points where you can add value. But start somewhere. And if you're going to start in one place, I usually recommend starting with kind of onboarding and activation. I encourage all of you to get off this call and go start digging in to how many of your customers who have signed up are actually active, how many of them ever activated, how many of them had some sort of value proof point. What does that mean? Right? We often measure time to value. What is value for your customers? When are they getting that? How many of them have gotten that? How long did it take? And I bet there's some room for improvement. If customers don't activate, they're not renewing, very rarely. And I think a lot of times we love our products and we think our products are self-explanatory. I'm going to put together a couple how-to videos and the customers are going to do it. And it doesn't happen that way. For lots of reasons, it just doesn't happen that way. So if you're going to do one thing to increase your client retention and eventually, hopefully, upsell, make sure they're using the product. Have somebody in there for a quarter or 2 quarters at your company who's just saying, all right, what do we need to do? Where are people falling off? How do we get them? How do we move them forward on their journey? Eventually, you can have playbooks and maybe whole teams that are focused on this. But I think if you give it attention for a quarter or 2, you'll find there's a lot you can do. Then, and maybe in parallel, if you have enough teams, but maybe not, it's focused on this kind of ongoing engagement with clients. Once they're up and running, having some sort of touch point. A lot of times it's quarterly, maybe twice a year, maybe it's annually. It depends on the customer, on who you're talking to there, on the depth of your engagement. But you're having proactive conversations with them. Again, founders can do this. It doesn't have to be a whole team. You're having some sort of conversation with them that's focused on the value they're getting out of your tool. Ideally, you're able to proactively share with them success stories, success metrics. You're strengthening the relationships. If you're doing this in person, you're going out for lunch, you're building up core relationships, but you're bringing back a lot too. You're deepening your own market knowledge of the market, of what's working, of what's not, of key use cases. One of the top things I get asked by early stage companies is for decks and playbooks and templates for executive business reviews. And that's great. We can work on that. I've done that. But don't be so focused on like a beautiful deck or the perfect presentation that you put off doing this. Even if it's picking up the phone and having a sort of like, hey, we're seeing things are working really well. How are you feeling? Just get started somehow. Finally, renewal, upsell, get those discussions started early. Don't wait for the day before a renewal to send over a contract. I know it happens. Don't send a customer an auto renewal message a week after it's happened. Like, renewals shouldn't be a surprise. If you're engaging regularly, you're hopefully talking about renewals ahead of time. You can talk about upsells, cross sells. Hey, can somebody else at your business be using this, another line of business? You can do that. Don't wait for the renewal time to do that either. Leave time for contracting. If a deal took 12 months to close, the renewal is not going to sign in 2 days. So these are all the things that you can build on, right? Start with one of them, add on more. Founders can do these. You don't have to do them perfectly, just be doing them. And then you can start thinking about how to structure for repeatability, right? Rhys mentioned there are inflection points where you want your first hire. The biggest challenge I hear from most founders I work with is not thinking about that first hire. It's someone junior, it's someone who's not very strategic. They're spending a lot of their time with a hire who can't quite be proactive and be strategic about the accounts. You can hire somebody senior who will want to roll up their sleeves. It happens. A lot of us, I have been SVP of CS and operations, and then I've gone back into a VP role, rolled up my sleeves, and loved owning accounts. It's fun. We enjoy it. So you can find senior leaders who like doing the early work. Eventually, you tier accounts based on the value they bring back. You don't want to spend the same amount of time with the $5,000 ARR account in like a random industry that's maybe not your focus as you do with a key logo in a really important area, or with a potential $200,000, $1 million account. But that can come. First, figure out what needs to happen and then start tiering. And eventually you differentiate roles. You don't have to think about that up front. You need the team to be a little bit bigger before you really start splitting up, let's say, onboarding from ongoing success, from renewals and those sorts of things. So that happens, but don't get so caught up with that in the early days that you don't focus on just the core things that need to happen. So anyway, that was a lot. Each of these topics can be its own discussion and a whole kind of a whole separate session. I know we have plenty of time for Q&A later, so we can go deeper in any of this as particular areas are interesting. But basically what I hope you take away, existing clients are super important. You can take small steps. It doesn't have to be perfect. Everything you do will make a big difference. And I look forward to answering more questions later.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrea. I think your list of 4 things could have been more like 12 or 20. Or that's what it looked like in our case. I think the things that really resonated, well, a lot, but the point around never has an investor not really wanted to talk to some customers prior to making another investment. That's certainly the case from our perspective. I thought also the point that it's a kind of a simple point, but one that's definitely underappreciated around, if customers don't activate, then they're definitely not going to be renewing. So I think it's something that's quite quickly overlooked sometimes, because once, like you said, once the sale's made, it's quite easy to kind of sort of move on to trying to make the next one for lots of companies. And then of course lots of interesting points around needing to get renewal sorted a while before actually submitting some kind of invoice, and making sure people don't feel like you're just, the only time you get in touch with them is when you're looking to renew. So thank you for that. I've got a ton of questions off the back, and again, I guess a reminder to everyone that if you've got questions on your individual case, please do share with them. But we share it in the chat, sorry, so that we can then try and address them. But it would be great to turn to Ejieme now to hear your perspectives, if that's okay.
That would be great. Thank you, Rhys. And great, I think, intro by Andrea there, because I think we're going to hit on many similar points. I've got 3 points to make. I'll only be about 5 minutes because I know we want to leave some time for some breakouts. But I think off of a lot of what Andrea was setting the stage with, SaaS, and I would maybe even say beyond SaaS, right? We're in business to give value to a customer that's purchasing something. And in particular, it's this kind of recurring value that drives recurring revenue. So this is an image I like to share as I'm helping people kind of ground on, what is this cycle of value recreation that our businesses are in. So if you take the customer-led, and I like to put ourselves in our customer's shoes when we can, the starting point in this is that they're considering your product. They buy your product. Hopefully they're using it, they're succeeding, they're seeing value out of it. Let's just stay with this success point first. The way that our model in SaaS works is that if they're succeeding, they're going to buy more and use more. And a lot of our businesses are sort of like consumption based, or even if you're in a seats or a license base, that's what's going to drive revenue downstream and kind of organically grow with that customer that's doing well. When your customers are also successful, we don't talk enough about their ability to advocate and to actually get other new customers to actually consider buying. That is free marketing. I am a big proponent of having your customers sell you. Your customers sell you more than any sales team, sorry, founders, more than even you sometimes, right? And so using their success to get more customers that actually look like them, because guess what? They're going to talk to their peers. They're going to talk to their colleagues at other companies that look like them. And if they're already successful on your product, the likelihood of another company or another buyer that looks like them is much higher. So you actually want to leverage their success to drive new prospects and to drive your marketing efforts. So I like to kind of start with this customer-led flywheel as the foundation of thinking about the benefit of customer success. And again, the point being here that recurring value breeds recurring revenue for your business. The next view, Andrea shared a really great kind of like NR growth. This is a slight maybe difference to that view, and shout out to John Gleason. He shared this recently, and I like the simplicity of it because we actually at Quiq we have a director of finance, and she's an Excel wizard, and she used a similar model to show us quarter over quarter what our growth looks like. And there are 3 key components of it, right? So in most SaaS businesses, most of our revenue is going to come from, and whether you use MRR or ARR, let's just call it revenue, right? Most will happen post-acquisition. And I'm going to stand on a little bit of a note here. I know we say post-sales. I actually want to get rid of post-sales because guess what? We're always selling in the SaaS model, right? You're selling when you need to renew someone. You're selling when you need to upsell and expand them as well, right? So I like to say now post-acquisition journey really starts with looking at, okay, let's first acquire them. And over time, your revenue is now going to be driven by, okay, are we renewing these people as well, right? You definitely want to make sure that's growing over time and not shrinking over time. And then lastly, are we expanding them over time? So really, if you look at, the largest SaaS businesses, let's take a look at Salesforce, for example. They kind of created SaaS, right? A lot of their 80%, usually quarter over quarter, year over year of their revenue is driven post-acquisition, right? Yes, as early stage founders and as, businesses are, wanting to get up and running, we definitely want to focus on acquisition and new revenue. But over time, the large portion of your revenue is going to be from your existing base. It's going to come from customers renewing with you, and it's going to come from customers that are expanding with you. As you build out product lines, as you have more things to offer and sell them, that revenue is going to grow organically. But that's predicated on you doing customer success really well. So a lot of the foundational elements that Andrea mentioned is going to get you this nice growth in revenue, but you need to make sure that you're taking care of those customers, you're proactive with them, and you're getting them the value that they need so that they can be growing with you as you grow your business. And the last thing I want to highlight, and this is something that, I used to do a lot of work in customer experience, customer service. it is not the same thing as customer success. So ex-management consultant, so I love 2x2 matrices. So of course I made one here as well. And the 2 dimensions are reactivity, so reactive and proactive. And you already heard this from Andrea's talk earlier. Customer success is way more proactive. It's also way more strategic. So if you think about what we typically like to think of as customer service and support, it's in this lower half, right? And it's reactive and it's discrete and transactional. A customer is using your product and they have a question, they need help, they need support. That is in this box. It is not customer success, which is way more proactive and strategic. And so early stage companies, and again, I've worked at one, sometimes these lines get blurred, and that's okay, right? You're starting out, people wear many different hats. It's okay to sort of collapse these 2 things, but still in the back of your mind, know that they are fundamentally different functions. And over time, as you mature your business, they will be separate teams. They will have separate skills and separate responsibilities as well. Starting out, understood if they're the same, and even I think more mature customer success teams, CSMs, always have to take customer support issues. It's just the nature of working directly with customers, but they're fundamentally different motions. And then lastly, customer experience, it's the word that gets thrown out a lot. It's the culmination of all of these things, right? So it's all of your touch points that you have with your customers, even your SDRs who might be prospecting with your customers today. That's a touch point with your customer. The way they deal with those prospects is part of your customer experience journey. Your product itself and how it works, sometimes maybe how it doesn't work, is also part of the customer experience. So all of these things are an amalgamation, but wanted to show the distinction and the difference between when we think about true customer success done well, that's really going to drive recurring revenue for you, that is strategic and proactive. So leaving you with 3 things, and these are just a summary of the 3 slides we talked about. Recurring value, so SaaS is predicated on recurring value, which leads to recurring revenue. Most of your revenue over time is going to come from those post-acquisition moments. So that's around renewals and expansions. So taking care of your customers and having a dedicated team is essential. And then lastly, customer success is strategic. It's not something that is reactive and discrete. It should be something that is proactive and something that you are investing in over time. And I'll leave you with one thing that I think we all should be doing, because it's been really, really fruitful for us to look at our business in this way. And I think starting out, having the foundation of starting to break out your revenue into these 3 buckets and looking at them over time. So of course, track your new customer revenue, track month over month, quarter over quarter, your renewal revenue. So how much of those renewals are you putting in? And then your expansion revenue. And this is, of course, the kind of net revenue retention formula if you put all these together. But even that kind of like simple stacked bar chart is a visual framing that the NRR number sometimes you lose sight of. I love the way that we can visualize what those revenue buckets look like over time. And with that, I think we'll go back now and maybe start the breakouts.
Awesome. Yes, again, some really really brilliant points in there. So thank you very much for putting that out there. Particularly love the humbling nature of the customers sell you more than founders and sales teams ever can. It's absolutely true. And of course, also very helpful in those next steps to also start talking about metrics, which I think would be something that would be great for us to cover potentially in the breakouts, but then also potentially if there's questions afterwards. We'll just jump into some short breakouts of maybe sort of 5 to 8 minutes. We'll kind of see how they go. Each will be facilitated by one of us. There's some questions that we shared in advance, which we'll put in the chat as some sort of starters for you, and they're along the lines of, you know, what does your current approach to CS look like now? What are your plans for expanding that function, developing it? Sort of how proactive do you feel like you're being versus would you like to be, and what steps can you take towards that? And then, of course, also a bit of a step into what some of the metrics are that you might be looking at. So I'm just going to pop some of those questions in the chat, and then I hope miraculously we'll all see you in a couple of breakouts in a second. There you go. Hello again. So I'm not sure if everyone has rejoined yet. I think we might be waiting for Andrea's group. I hope you had some useful, very open conversations. there's certainly some interesting questions that I am not in a position to answer that came up in our group. So I think it'd be great to have a couple of those put forward. I think given that we're here, I think it's worth us jumping into one of those questions. So and I can see Ejieme is here as well. So perhaps Kavita, if you wouldn't mind sort of posing the question that you asked that I can answer, that would be great.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ray. Thank you, Rhys. So it was really around when you have customers who are not engaging with the app. So ours is a EdTech app that reduces teacher marking workload and gives instant feedback to students. We sell into schools, and we know way before when the renewal time that schools will or will not subscribe based on how well they are interacting and engaging with us. So it's really the question is, what do you do with those schools who have not used the app from the time they have subscribed? And hence, when it comes to renewal, I know that they're not going to renew. But it's not because they've used it and they've found, and they kind of have decided that it's not fit for the students or teachers or, for whatever other product wise. It's more because they just haven't used it enough in the first place. So it's and with schools, we do have this problem where they subscribe and they're very enthusiastic at the time of subscription. And then it kind of all just dies down for a good 6 to 8 months.
So, Ejieme or Andrea, do you have a perspective on that? I realize we're sort of, as an EdTech fund, it's an EdTech festival. We haven't spoken about schools yet today. So, and I know it's not necessarily your direct wheelhouse, but would be really interested to know what your thoughts might be on that.
I missed the setup. I think I came in, the question was halfway through. I will say I am working with a technology right now that's working with K-12 schools. So I have a little bit of a perspective. Was the question what happens if there's not usage to start with? Then how do you...
That's correct. Schools who haven't engaged with the app, and hence when it comes to the time of renewal, that they're not going to renew because they haven't used it, and hence they cannot justify to their faculty of renewing a product that they haven't used.
This is why onboarding matters. This is why activation matters. So we have this exact, I just worked with actually an EdTech nonprofit who launched their first digital tool. And in the pilot, we had 2 modes, some schools that were incredibly successful and some schools that just never started. And so this is why onboarding matters. And I think, it depends why the schools buy in to begin with, but it's really, this is where you focus on the first 3 weeks or the first month. What we found with our app was that school administrators had to be bought in. They had to see the value. And we're talking in the other breakout about kind of setting expectations up front. We started setting expectations in the sales cycle and then continued them through the kickoff and through onboarding, that if the admins wanted to see success, they needed to make time. And we gave them multiple ideas. How do you make time? Let's take 5 minutes out of your team meeting and get folks signed up. We're going to send reminder emails. But ultimately, I had a discussion with another EdTech company recently where they weren't seeing signups. And you can't just put something out there and count on folks to sign up. It has to come from a manager. The importance and the value have to come from the manager. The time has to be set up from the manager. The incentives have to come somewhere. Someone in there needs to be helping them. And you can have a perspective. The company should have a perspective of, here are the things that work. You're tracking this. You're reporting back to them. Hey, you've had 5 signups. You were expecting 20. How can we help you? What are you? And but you're in there. You're active. It's in that first month. You're really doing everything you can to make that happen.
Cool. Thank you for that. I think you have given me some good ideas there. Thank you.
Awesome. Is there a final question or another case that came up that someone would like to raise? I'm aware we only have a minute left, so I don't want to run over too much. I do have one myself, but does anybody have one that they'd like to raise? Or was anything said in your breakouts, guys, that you think it's worth sort of addressing to the whole group now? Okay, the question that I had was around so how, in which ways do you incorporate customer feedback into sort of product roadmap? And I guess a broader point about how customer success teams and relationship leaders sort of work with other teams to make sure that everyone's sort of rowing in the right direction, because that seems like a really, such a rich sort of source of information when you're, liaising with customers like this, making sure they're successful. But that sort of joined up approach seems quite hard to actually make happen. So if you've got tips on that, I think that'd be really welcome.
Yeah, great question. I like to bucket this in, there's many different ways to measure it, but like a voice of the customer, right? Whether it's with, discrete surveys across the customer journey, whether it's surveys within product. I think it's really important, obviously, to listen to your customers and to be able to action that feedback and then to play back to them that based on this feedback, here's how we've, improved the product, or here's new features that we've added, or even how we've improved the experience itself. So I think it's really important. I think customer success can oftentimes own it, but products may be able to own it. But I think either way, wherever it lives in your organization, having specific kind of listening points on that journey, looking at that feedback, actioning it. And I think the last step, playing back to your customers what you've been able to do with it, is really important, so that next time you ask for feedback, they're willing to give it because they know it's actually going to be used.
Yes. Yeah, that's super interesting. Super interesting. And I guess it's almost like keeping some of the nimbleness of the process when you're in your earliest days and founder-led, and sort of trying to maintain that element of it as you sort of move into a more developed team structure. Andrea, do you have any final remarks before I say thank you?
No, gosh. Associate product feature requests with like ARR and revenue and those sorts of things, but that's a whole other topic. No, I thank you for setting this up. There were so many great questions. Ejieme, I loved your slides. Like those were just so, I had like all this text and I'm like, this is it. This summarizes it so beautifully. So thank you for what you brought, and Rhys and Ejieme for organizing this.
Terrific. Thank you. You've done the wrap up for us. Really appreciate you both joining and for your openness and sharing. And there's so much more we'd love to do on customer success in the coming months. So hopefully we can be in touch with you and with attendees as well, to make sure that we hopefully keep providing some useful starting points and advice for you. But this event brings the festival to an end. So thank you very much to everyone for joining, and to everyone in the future who's watching this back or reading the summary that Alex is putting together, who's on here as well. So thank you again. We hope you found it useful, and we'll be in touch with the summaries in due course.
Thank you. Great meeting everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.